What would you do if your entire life was shattered in a moment of racial injustice? Imagine being a successful, hard-working professional, your accomplishments recognized by all, only to have your dignity stripped away in front of a crowd. This is exactly what happened to Naim, a person whose only crime was being black. In an instant, their world turned upside down, and the consequences were far beyond what anyone could imagine. But it didn't end there. 45 minutes later, something unimaginable unfolded that no one could have predicted. What happens next will make you question everything you thought you knew about racism. Stay with us. Chris was living the dream, CEO of a rapidly growing company, respected by peers, admired by colleagues, and someone who had worked tirelessly to reach the pinnacle of success. With years of hard work and sacrifice behind him, he had earned the right to fly first class, something many could only dream of. It wasn't just about luxury. It was a symbol of how far he had come, of all the barriers he had broken. On this particular day, Chris was headed to a major business meeting, something that could change the future of his company. But as he entered the boarding gate, something strange happened. A quick glance around the terminal, the usual airport hustle, but then, the moment he approached the gate agent, the atmosphere shifted. The sudden coldness in the air, the slight hesitation from the staff, something felt off. It was the kind of moment you can't put your finger on, but something told him that the reality he knew was about to collide with a harsh, unspoken truth. Little did he know. This would be the moment that would redefine his entire journey and set off a chain of events that no one could have expected. Chris had always been the kind of person who let his success speak for itself. From humble beginnings, he'd worked his way to the top, his name now recognized by industry giants. Flying first class was just another part of his routine. He deserved it. Or so he thought. As he stood at the gate, waiting for his turn to board, a sudden chill ran down his spine. The tension in the air felt too thick, like a storm was gathering just out of sight. When he approached the counter, the agent, a young woman with a tight smile, barely looked him in the eye. She scanned his boarding pass, paused, then flicked a glance at the computer screen. There was a beat of silence. She finally spoke, her words cold and clinical. "Your seat's been changed." "Changed?" Chris asked, his brow furrowing. "What do you mean? My reservation was for first class." The woman hesitated, as if unsure how to respond. "There was an issue with your seat. Please follow me." Confused but willing to roll with it, Chris followed her down the jet bridge. But as they reached the plane's door, another employee stepped in front of him. "Sir, I'm afraid there's been a mistake. You're not cleared for first class today." Chris's heart skipped. "What do you mean?" he demanded. "I've been flying this route for years. My seat's already been confirmed." The agent's response was as unyielding as the door blocking his entry. "I'm sorry, sir. Please return to the gate. Someone will escort you to your new seat." Chris stood frozen for a moment, disbelief washing over him. This couldn't be happening. As he turned, he noticed a few eyes on him. A whisper passed through the line of passengers, most of them white. But no one dared to speak out. A knot tightened in his chest. This wasn't just a mistake. Something was happening here. Something he couldn't quite understand, but felt in the pit of his stomach. He walked back to the gate, frustration bubbling over into anger. He couldn't shake the feeling that something more was at play than just a simple error. The woman at the counter was gone, replaced by another, less familiar face. This time, it wasn't just a seat that was being denied. It was his dignity. "I'm sorry, sir," the new agent said, her voice lacking any empathy. "We've upgraded you to economy. There's no more first class available." Chris's pulse quickened. He was no stranger to adversity, but this felt like something more, something personal. "I don't understand. What's the reason? I'm a paying customer." The agent's gaze dropped to the floor, avoiding his. "There's nothing I can do, sir. Please take your seat in economy." Chris couldn't breathe. His mind raced, the injustice of it all crashing down on him. Was this really happening? Was he being singled out because of his race? His hand trembled as he looked toward the rest of the passengers, who were now staring at him as if he were the problem. But it didn't stop there. As he made his way to the back of the plane, the stares intensified. The whispers turned into quiet laughter. And Chris couldn't escape the sinking feeling that something was deeply wrong. He took his seat, trying to compose himself, but the anger, fueled by the sting of embarrassment and confusion, roared inside him. What was supposed to be just another business trip was now the beginning of something far more profound, and he wasn't the only one who knew it. The flight attendant passed by, her eyes flicking to his seat, and then to the front of the cabin. She paused. The subtle shift in her expression didn't go unnoticed. It was almost as if she knew what was happening but remained silent, complicit. Chris's mind raced. How was he supposed to just sit there, pretending like nothing was happening, when his very existence had just been denied the respect he had earned? But before he could process his next move, the captain's voice came over the intercom, a calm and neutral tone that only served to heighten the tension. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are now preparing for takeoff. Please ensure that your seat belts are securely fastened." But in that moment, Chris wasn't thinking about seatbelts. He was thinking about what to do next and how far this injustice would go before it was too late. As the plane's wheels lifted off the tarmac, Chris couldn't shake the overwhelming feeling that something was terribly wrong. He looked out of the window, but the view was distant, out of reach, just like the life he had worked so hard to build. The injustice weighed heavy in his chest. Every minute of this flight felt like a suffocating reminder of how far he still had to go, even when he had already made it so far. But then, as the seatbelt sign flicked off, everything shifted. A group of passengers began whispering loudly, pointing towards Chris. Their eyes, filled with a mixture of curiosity and disdain, made him feel smaller than he had ever felt in his life. Then, without warning, one of them, a well-dressed man in a suit, stood up and called the flight attendant over. His voice was sharp, accusing. "Why is he sitting in economy? He's clearly not supposed to be there." Chris froze. The sting of embarrassment was overwhelming. His hands clenched into fists as anger surged through him. "I've done nothing wrong," he muttered. But the words felt empty in the face of the stares. His voice quivered. The attention of the entire cabin was now on him, and it felt like the walls were closing in. The flight attendant approached, a look of hesitation in her eyes. "Sir," she began softly, "please remain seated. We'll sort this out." But it was too late. The man had already turned to others around him, spreading the same accusations. "They don't belong in first class," he shouted. "This is an outrage." Chris's heart pounded in his chest. Every word, every glance felt like a slap to his face. It wasn't just a mistake, it was a direct attack on his worth, his humanity. His throat tightened as he fought back tears, feeling the weight of his entire existence reduced to the color of his skin. For the first time, Chris felt completely powerless. His entire life had been about proving his worth, fighting against odds, and breaking barriers. But in this moment, he realized how quickly those barriers could come crashing down. The captain's voice interrupted the chaos. "Ladies and gentlemen, we ask that you all remain calm. There's no need to escalate this further." But it was too late. The damage had already been done. Chris was no longer just a man on a business trip. He was a symbol, a target, a reminder of the racial injustice that still ran rampant in the world,